Diddy Combs, Luigi Mangione, and Ghislaine Maxwell, all locked up in the worst prison that, trust me, you never, ever, ever want to visit, let alone spend any time there. Going to take you inside probably the most notorious prison, definitely the most famous one right now in America. I'm Tom Zenner of Tom Zenner on YouTube, co-host of 1 Degree of Scandalous with Kato Kalin, our bi-weekly podcast that hopefully you subscribe to and watch every single week. Sean Diddy Combs, the creepy, once glorified king of hip-hop, now faces allegations so horrifying that they're gonna blow out his entire legacy. Accusations of violent assault and criminal conspiracy that paint a chilling picture of a man who wielded his power to destroy lives. Luigi Mangione, he stands accused of one of the most chilling crimes in corporate American history. Cold, calculated murder of American healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. And Ghislaine Maxwell, another monster from hell, already convicted of being the sidekick to Mr. Evil himself, Jeffrey Epstein. All three, once who were all considered untouchable in their respective worlds, now share the same fate. Trapped inside the grim walls of Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, where the guilty are stripped of their former power and face a reckoning that matches the gravity of their alleged crimes. Inside MDC, the conditions are as infamous as the convicts and the criminals that it holds. Overcrowding, isolation, and neglect, with little regard for even the most basic of human needs. For criminals like Combs, Maxwell, and Mangione, there's no luxury, no privilege, no escape from the relentless reality of life behind bars. They opened the doors for the first time in 1994, so it's 30 years old. It's not like it's a relic. It's not like Alcatraz. I mean, 30 years. It's not that long ago. This is something that, maybe at the time was considered a modern facility that would be able to house these types of inmates and criminals for a very, very long time. The initial intent was to design this building as an administrative detention facility to house federal pre-trial and holdover inmates. Okay, so it really wasn't meant to be a long-term prison. Something happened, though, and this thing went completely in the gutter. Okay, I'm sure you're curious, as was I. How many people can they pack in here in these borderline inhumane conditions? 1,600 people. That was the original intent, because remember, this was not something where they were going to put inmates after they were convicted of a crime for the long term. There's federal prisons throughout the country that handle that. This was more of an in-between place to house them pre-trial or for holdovers. So it was never meant to be one of the most notorious, like big-time prisons we hear about and see in movies and things like that. This had a specific function, but of course, they abused it and they ran out of room, and there were more criminals than they could deal with in New York, apparently, when you let crime run free. So they started cramming more people in here. And then you have to consider, what does this all cost? Have you ever stopped to think about how much the government has to pay to house these inmates in these shitty conditions? Well, the number is $40,000 per inmate per year. $40K for this type of treatment, for these type of, primitive and disgusting conditions. You know how former inmates describe MDC? As a modern day hellhole. For the infamous criminals who are confined within the walls, life is really reduced to a brutal fight for survival. That is what's going on for them. This is a rough place. We know about these uber famous criminals, but everybody in there, or at least most of them, are tough. They're bad dudes. They're bad. Females, men, young, old. But what about the ones that aren't guilty, that are stuck in there? Now, that's a story for another day, but I'm just setting the scene so you understand just what life is like inside MDC. We can't imagine it, but hopefully this will open your eyes a little bit about what the reality is for people that are put there. The conditions. MDC cells they're small, they're damp and suffocating, with barely enough room to even stretch your legs, let alone your sense of self-worth. Now, this is New York, folks. In the winter, the heating system is more of a cruel joke than a functional utility. It's not working a lot of the time, or not working well enough. Temperatures, well, they plummet, leaving inmates oftentimes wrapped in threadbare blankets, shivering. And how about the summer? The opposite. You know it, man. There's no AC there, no air conditioning. You're not allowed to bring a fan in there. The air is stifling. The cells transformed into ovens. Water, it runs rusty. It's not great. Okay, it's not going to win any awards. That's for damn sure. And the food, they say it's barely recognizable as something you can sustain yourself on. This is not gourmet. This is not. You're not going to find a healthy salad bar here, right? Unlike what they're used to. Some of these people we're talking about, that's their life, and this is what their new life is like. The food is served on plastic trays with portions so small, probably wouldn't even satisfy a child. Mold, man, that creeps along the walls, and there's rats. Of course, this is New York City, so there's rats scurrying through the cracks, and the smell of decay, they say, lingers like a curse. Imagine being locked up in that day after day, knowing this is your new reality. But it actually can be worse for some. The brutality of isolation is something that's very common there, okay? You get out of hand in there, you're going into solitary confinement, a place you probably don't want to be. The solitary confinement cells, they say, are about the size of a parking spot. A parking spot. Inmates are left alone with their thoughts and not much else for 23 hours a day, alone. I hope Diddy has spent a lot of time in isolation. I hope he's gotten to know solitary confinement very, very well. And word is, it doesn't take a violent outburst in the yard or a physical confrontation or a fight or, mishandling one of the guards to get you sent to solitary. They say maybe speaking out of turn or possessing a contraband item like an extra packet of sugar. That can get you into solitary confinement at MDX. All right, now let's talk about the infamous names that I mentioned off the top that are in the news almost every day. When this happens, these are the biggest stories. They dominate the front pages. They lead newscasts. Mangione's become a rock star for killing somebody. Cold-blooded murder on the streets of New York with cameras rolling. This is almost insanity. It's almost surreal when you think about the level of fame that we're talking about here. And Diddy, there was no bigger star than him for a very long time, and he abused it. And he may have finally faced his reckoning, and he's going to be doing it inside MDX. And you know what's crazy? Diddy and Mangione aren't that far from each other. Their cells are fairly close at MDX. And then take a little detour, a couple lefts and a right down the hallway, and Ghislaine Maxwell's cell is there. So 3 notorious creeps, all locked up in the worst prison in the U.S. Man, it's almost like poetic justice if you think about it. These 3 that have inflicted so much pain on other people, especially Diddy, and especially Ghislaine Maxwell with her association with Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know about you, but I haven't found 1 ounce of sympathy. Not one for those 2. Mangione, I don't know, man. I think there's a lot more to peel back and learn about him. Whatever launched him into the state where he would get this 3D gun with a silencer, by the way, plot this thing out, have an exit plan, have the bikes ready, give up a life of privilege, which he was flushing down the toilet by committing this crime, unless he thought he was so smart he would get away with it, or so lucky, or so maybe he was so delusional. But Diddy, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Mangione, who are just used to the finer things in life, and they have now discovered that their new reality is a bona fide hellhole. I think the biggest question is this: will the punishment fit the crime? I don't know, but I can tell you they're not going to be the same person when they come out, if they come out, as they went in to MDC.